Hello, everybody. We are back. It's Brendan and Brandon. Brandon, welcome to the channel, as we
Hey.
often do. How are you doing today?
Oh, I am doing great. Turkey Day, Hawks right up at the top of the division. Got a football game in a couple days away. Doesn't get better than this, I don't think.
Yeah, we are coming to you on a Friday this week because of the holiday, but we are here nevertheless. We're going to talk about this Raiders game. The Seahawks have been off. We've been nearly 2 weeks without a Seahawks game, but that's about to be remedied in just a couple of days here. We're taking on these Las Vegas Raiders. So
Raiders.
this is as far as this team actually, making the postseason and having a good year, this is kind of a must win just because of the level of opponent. But there's a lot to feel good about. Before we start talking about just this game, a couple things happened over the last week, over the bye week. I think the central, most interesting thing going on with these Seahawks right now would be the return of Trey Brown. So we don't yet know if he's going to play, but according to Carroll, it sounds good. So let's talk about this for a little bit because I think a lot of people are curious. How are we going to use him? Because the cornerbacks have been pretty good this year. So what do you think happens with Kobe when he comes back? I'm sorry, not Kobe, Trey.
Well, you probably had a Freudian slip there, because I listening to Clint Hurt's comments in his press conference would seem to indicate that he feels good about Michael Jackson's play on the outside. We know they're not going to take Tariq Woolen off the football field. So if we're talking about trying to find a place to pepper in Trey Brown into the lineup, the one place that you would say that you could do that in is with the nickel spot. I don't know. I don't think he's a natural fit from having ever done it in his past, but he is a natural fit from a skill set standpoint. And though Kobe does have caused fumbles, he's got a sack on the year. He's got some real bright moments. I think he's had a couple of interceptions called back, in fact, so it could look even better than that. He's also had some struggles out of the slot, which is, to me, I don't knock him for much because he's playing kind of out of position. He's never like Trey, he's never played that position in the past, and so you're asking quite a bit from him in his rookie year to play out of position. And so to see him not necessarily succeed in that role, I don't think is extremely. It doesn't upset me or surprise me. But the coaching staff could say, well, maybe Brown could get us in there and make us a little bit better on the slot, situation. Personally, at this point, I'd just be as happy as to let Trey potentially sit and let him continue to get better and heal off that injury and have that insurance there on the bench. The problem right now is not an outside corner; it's an inside corner. Brendan, I think we're gonna have probably the same problems we have with Trey Brown that we have with Kobe Bryant on the inside if you try to kick him in there. Just saying we're going to kick this guy in because he's talented. It's a whole nother beast on that inside for those slot corners. It's a different mindset. They got to tackle. And a lot of Trey Brown's game. DK Metcalf talked about this in his press conference with Trey Brown coming back. He's like, yeah, he just always is getting in the way. And remember, I've talked to you about that's his special skill that he does is he stays on top of receivers on their routes. So you could be trying to run a post and he'll be up in front of your post. You're going to run a 9. He's going to stay up in front of your 9. And that's what he does, but he's best suited on the outside. Unfortunately, Michael Jackson's having such a good year. I just don't think you can take him off the football field right now.
Yeah, it is a little bit of an interesting problem. We have this abundance of outside corners, and we don't really have a nickel. I think that I don't know what's going on with Justin Coleman. It feels like he has the world's longest what was it, hamstring injury? Like he got that in week 1 and we haven't seen him since.
It's really, really tight. Really, really.
Yeah. But yeah, it's certainly not a bad problem to have, but there is a little bit of an issue at that nickel corner spot. Kind of makes you wish maybe we still had Marquise Blair on tap because he had done that a little bit, had some success. I remember
Mm-hmm.
last year he was better playing nickel than Amadi was.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and much like last year, Brendan, to your point on this, the bar is not very high to have to clear here for a backup to come in and outperform where Brian's been at the position. You take away and look, the fumbles and all that, I think is a big part of his game, and they will be into the future. I do like Kobe potentially on the outside going into the future somehow, some way. We've got
Right.
kind of a log jam right there right now, and it's only getting deeper. But Michael Jackson's had a very good year for you, and he's done his job over there, and he's a great tackler. And I don't know what he's done to necessarily necessitate you taking him off the field. And as good as Trey is, he didn't cement himself as a starting position. I just think right now, Brendan, we're stuck with the slots position, I guess, is the long way around it and what I'm trying to say here. Because like you, I go, okay, Justin Coleman's back off that hamstring. It's not that bad. What's happened is that they like what Kobe gives him versus what Justin gave him, which remember in preseason, Justin wasn't looking good. He hasn't been good the last couple of years before he came here. There's not 2018, 2009, that's not the Justin Coleman you're getting. So he's not good enough. I agree with you. I would have preferred having Blair on the roster. This is one of the reasons I poo-pooed cutting him at the time, was not just for the safety depth he provided, but also the slot depth he provided as well. And so it's a frustration, but it's a little bit like the Cody Barton situation, a linebacker. There's really not a whole hell of a lot you're going to be able to do about it.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree, especially now when we're past the trade deadline. But we'll see. I mean, it's not like Kobe has necessarily been playing bad all year. He's been bad the last 2 weeks. He was bad the first couple games, but he's actually had an extended stretch where he was playing pretty well. So maybe he just needs to find that again. I don't know. I have a little more optimism on the Kobe Bryant front than I did even like a month ago. So hopefully something pans out there.
I think he's fine. I've pointed that I don't think he's like the death knell on defense, or that he's getting picked on or picked apart. He's just struggling a little bit, I guess, to try to put some nuance on this. He's struggling just a little bit in that slot role. Versus if you had maybe league average play out of there, and he's not quite hit that mark this year from that standpoint. Maybe just a hinge below. And the playmaking he brings, not just on the fumbles. I think, again, 2 interceptions called back, I believe, from penalties too.
Right.
I love this kid's future. I think he's been everything we kind of hoped he would be when we draft in the 4th round. It's just he's having to kind of be the good soldier here and play that out of the position thing that we've seen them do at times, where it is what it is. You're going to struggle when you're being asked to do something new for the first time, especially as a rookie in the NFL.
And that was the main thing that came out of the bye week. So that's a big positive. The only other thing of note, it was a pretty quiet bye week, honestly. The only other thing of note would be that we finally got confirmation just earlier today, I think, that Dwayne Eskridge has indeed broken his hand. So he is likely to hit IR. He's definitely out for this game. We know that. He's the only real injury we have right now, actually. So that's certainly a positive. But starting to think the D. Eskridge thing, that might be the end of it. We might not see him again this year, and he might not be on the team next year at this point. So we've probably seen the last of him. I know most people have already kind of made their peace with that, but yeah, it's probably over.
I try as much as I can when we do this now, Brendan, when we come to guys like this or situations like this, to really not jump too fast into a direction and really let it bake. But I'm with you on this. It's just a struggle here to find the patience for him. Coming out of the draft, I had a scouting report on the kid. Certain things stood out about him. He had some little Tyreek Hillisms to his game. He could do little things like that stood out, that, whoa, that pops. The speed pops. It does. But then there were a little bit of warning signs on the other side of it. The tape showed he was not a natural route runner. The tape showed he was not a natural hands catcher of the football. As a receiver, when those are 2 things out the gate I'm putting upon you, that's going to be a tough road to climb up, especially then when you add in the fact that now he's 24 coming on the team in his rookie year. So he's advanced in age. I don't have as much time to get his development as I would on other players. That's a problem. And then you put in as sort of what has been his death knell in his pro career here, injuries, which continue not just from here or from over there or underneath over there or to the side over there or back in the corner there. It's hitting him in every different direction. If I'm not mistaken, we've had a foot, we've had a concussion, we've had a hand. I think we've had a hamstring.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm missing 2 or 3 other things we've had. This isn't even 2 years into the league, is it? I mean, aren't we it's 2 years into a career. And so that's where I try to maybe tap my brakes a little and go, well, but it is only 2 years in the career. But then I go, yeah, but what's the hope in the future? Is he comes back next year and his route running is going to get any cleaner, or his catching is going to get any better? I don't see a ton of evidence for that necessarily from what I've seen this year so far. A guy that, again, couldn't even crack past Goodwin, who's having a good year. He's performing well, but Goodwin's just a veteran guy you pulled off kind of the scrap heap of free agency.
Right.
He wasn't a guy you gave a three-year, $30 million deal to here. So it's if that guy is beating him out, if Penny Hart is beating him out, is Freddie Swain is beating him out as they have in recent years, at what point does he have to start popping here and showing us that there's actually something here that's worthy of that the pedigree? Because otherwise we're just going, well, he was a second round pick, which is exactly, Brendan, against the methodology and approach of this front office in the past. It's supposed to be, it doesn't matter where you were selected, doesn't matter what pick you were taken at. If you aren't measuring up or you aren't good enough to go, then we're going to have to find somebody else.
Right. And I think the time to find somebody else has come. I don't think he's going to take the field for the Seahawks again at this point, honestly. Even when he's healthy, we barely play him, it feels like. It got to the point where he was getting like the garbage snaps, whatever, Metcalf, Lockett, and Goodwin left behind. So that era ended very quickly, but that's actually the only injury of note on this team right now. So we're in a pretty good place.
So all in on Odell Beckham is what you're really trying to say. Is that what you're setting me up for here?
No, I'm not going to have that conversation. I may make a video on it at some point just to quickly get it out of the way, but he's not going to want to come here, right? We use more tight ends than anybody. We don't use receivers that much. What's he going to do here except catch 2 passes a game?
Yeah, he'd be very unhappy very quickly. I'm sure he'd love the culture, but it wouldn't. And he wants to be paid too much money, and he's going to get one of those 2 teams that are. He's got, two different teams vying for him. So that means there's probably some kind of bidding then more going on at that point, being between the Giants and the Cowboys. Giants are weird because they don't have they have oddly not very much cap space next year to do much. And the Cowboys are already with their situation on the best place either. So I don't know if he's just looking to take the rented deal, but I'm out. I wouldn't be on that. But our depth is definitely going to be challenged with this just a little bit, Brendan, because now you do get a little more into an untested. But Penny Hart's back, I guess. So is Penny Hart any worse than what Goodwin's been so far? I guess no. Mm-hmm. So it's probably equivalent as far as where the roster ends up shaking out at.
Yeah, I mean, like David Moore's probably out there somewhere right now. You could probably go pick him up.
I think he got injured or something.
Yeah.
Something happened with him, arrested or injured, or that's a wide variance. Something happened. I saw his name in the story, but I think they'll go more to Brendan. I think they'll likely go to either, if it's not Cade, then it's going to go to Bo Melton if they're bringing somebody up. They already have Drake Young running active spots already on the roster, so he's not even a guy you really are bringing up necessarily. But that's the route you go with that at that point, I think.
Addison Shelby, thank you for the membership re-up. Appreciate it. Yeah, welcome to the squad over here on Seahawks Brendan Nelson.
What's up, Addison?
Okay, so let's turn the page to this Las Vegas Raiders game. Raiders this year, bit of a disappointment, I would say. 3-7, not what they were hoping for when they hired Josh McDaniels, brought in Devante Adams, Patrick Graham as their defensive coordinator. They were expecting bigger and better things. Hasn't really happened yet. Their offense is pretty good. They can score some points. They've had success in some of these games, but they've got some real injury problems over there. Defense, however, is really, really bad. Not necessarily in terms of points allowed, but in terms of like advanced metrics. Yeah. It's considered to be one of the worst, if not the worst defense in the league. So, let's start with the Raiders on defense, because I see 1 or 2 bright spots, and then there's a lot of garbage here. So let's start with that Raiders defense.
Well, watching the tape with them, I mean, obviously Max Crosby is where it begins for them. He's having I don't know if we'll go defensive player of the year. We'll call it all pro type year, I think, for them off the edge. He has really stood out in watching the tape. There's not a lot else that stands out on the defense. I'm going to be honest to you. And watching it, just I can understand where the advanced metrics comes from. It's not a lot of other people are supplying any kind of real consistent pass rush. Chandler Jones, despite the money he's made this year, I think has 1 sack on the year?
0.5.
0.5. Hasn't even gotten to a full sack yet on the season with all that money spent. And boy, did we dodge another bullet there. And boy, should we get another pat on the back to John Schneider for having avoided trying to throw money at him, even though, because a lot of us were saying out there was this may be a fit. He's a 3-4 guy. You can bring him and have him do 3-4 stuff. Uchenna has been 3 times the player. I mean, as far as all the way around in that. So good on us with that. Chandler does play on the defense here. So you do have 2 guys on the edge that theoretically can give you some issues. Teams have been kind of aware of it, even though Chandler's not having the production. You look at teams playing them and there's a lot of Brendan just short passing. dink and dunking through. Their secondary does not like to tackle. They do not like to tackle, and they don't like to get off blocks. So this is a game where Kenneth Walker, you're talking about pitch plays in space, getting to the edge, getting guys on short routes like DK Metcalf and making him get tackled. This is a play where these are the type of game where I would test them on the secondary and say, how can you do it? They also do a lot of Brendan stuff that used to drive me crazy with. We did a couple years ago, especially with Norton. Five-man fronts, the 5-man blitz packages.
The bear front, isn't that what that's called?
I guess that's a bit. I thought the bear fronts more got the 3-4 thing. This is more of like what you get with the base on a Sam with the 4-3 under. So
yeah,
the
I
Sam,
think we did a little bit of that.
Yeah, we definitely did a little bit of it, but we'd also do it where even if we weren't putting the Sam linebacker on the line of scrimmage, we'd bring a safety up as the 5th guy. But I've heard it referenced to, it's the 5-man blitz to nowhere, because all you're doing is bringing an extra defender to then essentially the line's got it blocked up. You're creating then extra space on the back end then for a quarterback to dice it up, especially if that quarterback's not obsessed with throwing it deep. If he's just looking for where the hole is then going to be placed in the defense with that 5th guy coming up on the line. And I know why they're doing it, Brendan, because what they're doing essentially is Patrick, I think you said his name was, he's bringing the guy up there so the offensive line cannot commit to doubling Max or Chandler on any snap. So they have to just block it clean across the board one-on-one. And that's what that forces with the 5-man front. It's not really a blitz per se, like a blitz where you'd run 6, 7, 8 guys at the line, because that's just to overload things. This is to get your guys on the edge, those single blocks. But the problem becomes, Brendan, again, if those guys aren't getting home, number one, and then number two, if you have a quarterback who's smart enough to then recognize where the hole is going to be in the zone to then take advantage of that type of front. I don't like those. I didn't like it when we ran it. I don't like it when I'm watching on the Raiders tape. It creates a lot of free and easy yards for the opposition.
Yeah. Fun fact about these Raiders. You got Max Crosby with 9 sacks, and then you have no other players with more than 1 sack. That gives you an idea of what you're talking about there, where it's the Max Crosby show.
It really is. And he's a Tasmanian devil coming off the edge, no doubt about it. But he is the only one whipping up any ground over there. It's a lot of nothing burger across the board.
Yeah, Cleveland Farrell and Chandler Jones have combined for 1 total sack this year, by the way. They both are at 1/2.
That's rough. I mean, I guess people should have adjusted their expectations on this team a little bit more appropriately. They've definitely been down. They were counting on creating themselves as an offensive juggernaut, I think, to sort of allow that to carry the day. And then they would have their 2 edge rushers who would sort of, pilfer it essentially. And there's some other teams that have taken that approach too, Brendan, and have had some success this year. Browns are trying to take that approach with a Clowney and Garrett. There's a couple of, where they don't do a whole lot else in other places of the defense, or they've got a couple of bright spots like a Denzel Ward with the Cleveland, but that's where it's at. That's where they're going to try to make their hay on those teams. It just hasn't worked out because the offense hasn't been a juggernaut, but we'll get to why that reason is here in a second. But this is a defense you can attack across the board, Brendan. They're going to want to be aggressive. The boot action with Geno in this game, I saw a lot of that working. I mean, when Matt Ryan was pulling that off in the Colts game, you're going, okay, Geno can definitely pull this off. I mean, Matt's struggling to get out along his rollout. He's struggling to get the ball out with any kind of force down the field on the rollout to get the guy in space so he can work up the field a little bit with some yak. But those plays were there across the board on the tape that I watched. It's frankly kind of a wonder the Broncos weren't able to beat them last week, because this is a team that is very vulnerable. They're not playing with a lot of fire. They're not going to throw a lot at you. We've had some defenses recently, Brendan, with the Buccaneers. I'd offer with the Cardinals, very, very varied and all over the place. And this defense doesn't do a lot to confuse you as much as those other defenses. That 5-man front can get very predictive for them too. They run it like, wow, another one, another down, another down, another down. It's kind of a problem for this Raider defense all the way around, I'd say, is predictability, something that stands out about them very clearly.
Yeah, that's interesting because their defensive coordinator, Patrick Graham, was the Giants defensive coordinator last couple years, and I thought he did a pretty good job of disguising things. They ran like a hybrid defense over there. I actually thought he did a fairly good job. So that's kind of interesting if things have gone completely the other way so far this year.
I wonder if, because remember with that Giants defense, you had it not really built around players. That was a defense that was built more towards the team aspect of things. Maybe he's been asked to go a little bit outside of his comfort zone from a coordinator standpoint this year because he's got the 2 edge rushers. And it's a little bit of a, yeah, your defense is great. You need to mold around getting these 2 guys going, though, first and foremost. And that adjusts his defense in a way that removes that disguise, especially if it's being done with the 5-man fronts, for instance. I don't remember the Giants being as much into that. I remember when they would blitz before, it felt like he was bringing like a couple extra guys, and it was a little more varied. It was a little bit more of a, you didn't know what you were getting. There was a little bit more of the chess going on right now. And maybe it's just that I didn't watch all their games this year too, Brendan. So maybe it's just been a recent thing because this last couple of games I've been really just paying attention to with them mainly. And maybe it's just been a recent thing with them this year, but it did stand out to me that nonetheless, like, this is a little bit predictable here. I'm seeing this. If I'm a quarterback walking up the line and I see that 5-man front, it's like, okay, now where's my hole? And these quarterbacks are finding it. Ryan was finding it. That's how they beat him. You gave him a veteran quarterback who could figure that out.
Yeah. Couple things to shout out on this defense, though. It seems like Perryman is having a pretty good year at middle linebacker. That's my impression of it. It seems like he's doing all right. The other linebackers they have on this team are atrocious, however. I think PFF thinks that they're some of the worst players in the league. They had them graded really, really low. They do have Rocky Sin, and I remember scouting him in the draft, and I was kind of intrigued by him. Seems like he's worked his way into becoming a pretty decent cornerback.
That's the former Colts second rounder, I think.
Yeah, I think he went to the Colts, ended up with the Raiders now. He seems like he's having a pretty good year. I remember liking him a little bit when I scouted him. He was very raw. If he is not a good tackler, I'm actually a little surprised by that because I remember that was something I thought he would be good at based off the based off his college stuff.
No, he was a good player. I liked him a lot too. That was one of those guys that, it's again from the Colts standpoint, their general manager and the way that situation's worked there. They haven't made all great moves, but things just haven't kind of worked for them, even though they've done some smart things. Their issue's also been they're not spending the money in retrospect too, with all the money they've had in the cap to sort of spend. But he was a guy that didn't develop slow. Let's face it as well, Brendan, that this Raiders defense is in the state that they're in because of missing on so many defensive players recently. Farrell, who you mentioned, who I believe is a top 5 pick. And it's hard. We're going to be doing a lot of studying on these recent history of draft picks in the top 5, hopefully very soon, Brendan. Hopefully we're going to do a lot of deep dives on the recent history of those kind of guys in where they've been picked. Because I would reckon to guess that teams have gotten better. And that when you tend to pick a player there, you tend to know what you're getting. And while they may not be the end all be all kind of player in the football field, the Hall of Famer, you are at least getting a very good player more often than not. Like, it's none of that like quarterback 20-30% hit rate crap. Like, you're getting a 75% possible hit rate on a top 5 pick, probably, of at least being a good to star level player. And they missed on Farrell in that place. They missed on Damon Arnett, a cornerback that they took in the first round, who's no longer with the team. He's gone. They missed on Jonathan Abrams, who they just released, a safety, another, I believe, top 20 pick, I believe, somewhere in that, maybe been in the 20s. But nonetheless, another first-round pick in recent years off the team this season. That's what's really been the cause. They just don't have the talent on the defense to hold up.
Right. So there should be a lot of good things you can do against this defense, like you said. I agree. I know it didn't result in anything better at the end of the day because the Broncos only scored 16 points. But watching that game, their offense looked as good as it's looked this year, I think. Mm-hmm. So you look at that and you go, yeah, this Raiders defense has some real problems. First drive of the game for the Broncos was a 92-yard touchdown drive. They had a drive that got down to the goal line and then Melvin Gordon fumbled. And, that should have been 7, ended up being 0. So you look at that game and you go, that's probably the best Denver's offense has been this year. And that gives you an idea of how bad this Raiders defense is. So after a not great game against Tampa Bay, I think there's reason to be optimistic that this offense will do work in this one.
Yeah, and I would say trust your tackles. Trust your tackles out there offensively with Abraham, Lucas, and Cross in this game. That was something with like the San Francisco game, with not running some deep routes and leaving guys in for protection, less guys running routes. It stunted your offense in that day, worrying about those edge rushers, Armstead and Bosa. Don't do the same thing in this game. Trust those tackles. They're holding up well on the outside. They might get beat here and there, but the squeeze will be worth this particular juice because you will get extra guys running routes. You'll complete plays. You'll get those drives continuing to move up the field. And you're not going to be able to, Brendan, necessarily have to hit it deep. This is where this kind of fits into his breadbasket a little bit, because Geno can throw the ball deep, but you're going to give him short and intermediate stuff. He's shown that this year. He'll take that all day long. He'll trust his guys. And when that 5-man front comes, well, you might have a little more heat in your kitchen. It might get cranked up a little bit earlier in the play than you're used to. But then if you've done the processing pre-snap about where you need to go with the ball, it's going to be some easy money on a few of these plays. So this is definitely one where I would expect our offense to be able to put up, if not 30 points, over 30 points on this Raiders defense.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right, and I think that's about all you can really say about this Raiders defense. It's not a very good bunch. Got some real weaknesses, especially on that defensive line. Chandler Jones, I think at this point is basically a net neutral player. I don't think he really is bringing anything positive to the table. Maybe you can't say he's a negative yet, but I look at it and I go, you've got a 3-4 edge. He's played in the 3-4 the last several years, and then you move him to the Raiders where they're playing this 4-3 most of the time, I believe.
Yeah.
And you see that the player sometimes has difficulty adjusting. And maybe that's what we're seeing here.
That's one of my, I've got some things that get stuck in my craw, and that's one of the things that get stuck in my craw because we have people that'll talk to us about it and say, go get this guy in free agency or go get that guy. And when we were a 4-3 defense, that's what we would hear a lot in our chats about. Hey, how about this guy who's a 3-4 end? We'll turn him. It's like, it's not, you don't want to bring a guy in and ask him to do something different than what's made him the most successful as a player. And in Chandler's case, going to make him nearly maybe a Hall of Fame type player when it's all said or close to a fringe, maybe we'll call it. And that's where you don't want to make that mistake. The Raiders are making that mistake a bit here. It's, the fact that he's fallen off this far, Brendan, I think saying a negative is well said, half a sack. We're 10 games into the season. I mean, that's not just league average play. That's not just slightly below league average play from a pass rushing productivity standpoint. That is a big negative from that angle. Surprising he's fallen this far, but an explanation is built in with him putting his hand in the dirt versus standing up. It's not the same thing. It sounds similar for folks because they go, well, they're lining in the same spot. And you go, yeah, but even that's not the same. Because when you're a 3-4 down defensive end in a 4-3 defense, you're not in necessarily the wide 9 technique every time, especially when you have Max Crosby, who's probably going to be the wide 9 guy, which then leaves Chandler Jones as like the 5 tech Red Bryant role by guy. You know what I mean? What I'm saying how that alignment goes on strong sides. So you go, well, that's silly. That's kind of stupid. And then that maybe it better explains, okay, that's how you get to half a sack on the season a little bit more easier. Yes, he's had some fall off, but he's also not being allowed to really go out there and hunt.
Right. Let's see here. Kevin Mullen, thank you for the $4.99. What up to my bro, Nick Fleming? Question. With D. Eskridge more likely out for this game, do we just cut ties and sign Will Fuller or bring Melton/Treadwell? We talked a little bit about Eskridge at the top, but is Will Fuller still out there?
I haven't heard him signed by anybody.
That's weird, man. I mean, we're in week 12.
If I'm going for Will Fuller, I need to just know one vital piece of information, which is, where is he at on his cycle? You know what I mean? If he's on a height on the cycle run point, I might be all in on Fuller at that point. But if he's on one of those like I'm trying to get clean, gotta get the P right, I don't know if I can go that direction with him at that point.
I mean, you'd only need him for a few months. Like you could just cross your fingers that nothing bad happens.
Hey, I mean, he is fast. He is very fast. That is for sure out there. I think though it is a bit of a sign with teams that have been out there in high need of receivers. Even a team like, let's say, the Packers, who haven't kicked the tires on that one, would probably be a bit of a warning sign to me that maybe there's not a feeling around leagues circles that he's at his best anymore. And then he may be one of those players kind of even off where his small heights were for a small bit of time is not in that same place or even close to it anymore.
Yeah.
I think the team's going to go with Cade Johnson. They've already shown you this before this point kind of. So I think Cade Johnson and Penny Hart are your 1-2s off the bench ahead of Melton and Treadwell. Treadwell's, I think you're, in case of emergency break glass and you have a guy who's played in the NFL, you can put on the football field if something crazy went on with injuries. But I don't think that he's going to be pulled off. And I think with Melton, there was a lot he had to clean up in his game in the preseason that doesn't lead me to believe that he's ready this year. Maybe next year. I have high hopes for Melton, but I think he had a lot of drop problems and just some things to kind of figure out on his side of things. But yeah, that's where I would go with it. That's where I think they will go with it.
I do think Treadwell's interesting because he had a pretty decent year last year. I think he had like 450 yards. That's not the worst idea. And you have him, you may as well utilize him. So I wouldn't be shocked if he gets burned.
Well, look, I'm not Cade Johnson, Penny Hart, Laquan Treadwell. I mean, if I'll let the coaching staff make their assessment of who's the better player on the practice squad field, but I don't think any of those guys is really moving the needle. And if any of those guys is having significant snaps on the football field, we're probably not going to be as productive offensively as we've been right now, or anywhere close. The thing with Laquan would also be a bit of a factor on this is, let's say it's not a matter of an injury situation on the outside. Let's say it's a matter of an injury situation on the inside. Is Laquan an inside guy in the slot? Because Penny Hart can do that. Cade can do that. That might be also a possible part of this that has to factor in too. So I think Laquan's been more of an outside guy.
I mean, you can have Lockett do a lot of inside stuff. There was a couple years ago, he was basically a pure slot receiver. He could just go back to doing that. And he made almost all of his plays from the slot. I remember looking at the numbers one year. I think it was 2019. He was in the slot constantly. So you could just go back to that.
I mean, you could, but then that's also one of those, do you want to break something that's working just fine? I mean, Lockett, Metcalf on the outside have been a great tandem for you and how they're going right now. Do you want to change that up to try to do something about a slot? And then, okay, what happens if Lockett's now a little less comfortable in the slot than he was on the outside, and the guy you get on the outside is much less productive than what you get in slot? I think it's more beneficial to have those guys on the outside. I think you can manufacture stuff for slot guys a little easier than you can for the guys on the outside. And having a guy like Lockett that challenges teams with his route running in the short and intermediate game, I don't think you can move him off that spot. I don't think slot's been enough of an issue for us right now. It's not even been anywhere close to what it's been for us on the defensive side of the ball. Not a problem, but just as far as a failing point, or a lackluster spot. I'm trying to find the right word.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, we do kind of need that slot guy. And I've liked Cade Johnson ever since we picked him up, so I would not be against him getting a chance at all.
No, I think we can give him. I think, again, understand they're not going to be a lot of. We're not going to be, I think, as anywhere near as high volume as we get on to the depths of the season. The team is starting to, the needle's moving towards more running the football. That's another part of this as well. I just don't think there's a lot of touches to be had there. I like what Goodwin's giving you. So we're talking about the fourth guy. I mean, even like a guy Derek Young right now. I wouldn't be mad about seeing him get some snaps and what he could do. I was very encouraged by what he brought in the preseason. I thought he was further ahead along than I thought he was going to be coming out of that small ass college that he was coming out of. So I'd be probably even more open to doing that. But we got some options, so we're not in a desperate place, which is a good thing. And the injury situation is really, to your point you mentioned about Goodwin, that's the only one you got on the team right now. So it's a good situation.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's turn the page to the Raiders offense here. We talked about their defense. It's pretty sad. This Raiders offense is a little bit better, but they've got some real issues this week in particular. So in the preseason, looking at this team, the reason why people thought they would be good would be, Derek Carr, good quarterback, Josh Jacobs, Devante Adams, and Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller. They had great stuff going on at the skill positions on offense. And as we sit here right now, they're down Darren Waller and they're down Hunter Renfrow. Josh Jacobs, surprising last-minute addition to the injury report today, questionable to go on Sunday. And Colton Miller, their starting stud left tackle, their best offensive lineman probably, also questionable. So they've been worn down a little bit here. And you saw the effect of that in these recent weeks. Like, they could not score a point against the Saints a few weeks ago. They've had a couple games where they took significant leads on bad teams like the Jags and the Colts, and then they kind of hit a wall at 20 points and just couldn't get past it. They were able to break through against the Broncos, but it took pretty much the whole game for them to actually get something going. So the offense is not in the state that it was even earlier this year when they put up 32 on the Broncos. They put up 29 on the Chiefs. They put up 38 on the Texans. This Raiders offense is not the same. So let's talk about what they do have going into this game.
Well, it's not a whole hell of a lot, as you said, and we've got to acknowledge a little bit. The Seahawks have definitely been a bit of a beneficiary of this on the year. It's been kind of a common theme that we've seen for this team against our opponents. The Detroit game, they were down about three guys from Swift to Amon St. Brown and DJ Shark. One of their linemen was out, I believe, in that game. We had Cardinals game down a couple of guys going to that game. They were down there. James Conner, remember Hopkins in the first one. You didn't. There's been a couple of games here we've had where we've really been able to benefit. We go down the list of them where it's teams have been decimated. The Saints game was another one that was like that. So here's another game that we're in that place, Brendan. You mentioned there was, let's say, we don't know with Miller, but he is questionable. You good spotting out on Jacobs, the running back. He's averaging 5.1 yards per carry. This team is going to be down Renfro and Waller. That's two of their three best pass catchers in this game. So they're going to want to lean back into that running game, giving him that 5.1 yard average. But at the very least, even if Jacobs plays, if that's a calf strain, like I know these calf strains go, you don't just massage that out in a day or two. It's going to be bothering you. It's going to be biting you a little bit. They're probably going to restrict some of his carries down, and he's having one of his more effective years right now. So that's just to think you're going to go into this game potentially then with them down 4/6 of their best offensive players, their fifth guy playing ailing with Colton Miller, and that you can't take advantage of that at home with this crowd. Again, where I go, okay, like you said, you got to look at them to me in the lens of this isn't the team that was through the first 5 weeks that put some points up on some teams, 29 against the Chiefs, 32 against the Broncos, even 23 against the Cardinals. Last couple of weeks, it's been 0, 20, 20, 16. That's over that stretch where there is no Waller, there is no Renfro. This is where some of these guys have been knocked down just a little bit. So to me, they're ripe for the pickings here a little bit, Brendan. This is ripe for us to take this game and really run away with it, coming on the heels of the bye week and a little well rested. Raiders coming back after it. After for them, a real probably big win for them as far as their field against a division rival like the Broncos last week on the road. Now they're coming back to back-to-back weeks. Now they're on the road. So back for Broncos, back home, now back out to Seattle. To me, this is a game that sets up for us to really be able to kind of step on them. And if we can step on them early and get up on them, Brendan, take the running game away. And now all he's got Devante Adams. Boy, that's where you could really, really put this game to bed early, really, really quick. I don't think it'll go that way, but that would be that'd be the way if I'm Carroll that I'd love to try to strike this one.
Right. So another fun fact about the Raiders here, Josh Jacobs has 930 rushing yards this year. So he's obviously one of the best running backs in the league. Their second leading rusher after that is Derek Carr. Their third leading rusher and second leading running back rusher is Brandon Bolden with 34 yards. So they probably more than any other team in the league lean on one player in their running game. They basically do not have a backup running back. They have one guy they just grind with.
Yeah, and then the other guy is Amir Abdullah. So you're going to get that lightning combo of the Abdullah-Bolden combo in this game if there is no Jacobs.
Yeah. They got Zamir White, too, who I remember liking a lot. I think the Georgia running back who tore both his ACLs.
Yeah, totally. I like that guy a lot as well. But even if he comes in the game, he's not a game breaker player. He's your 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of guy. So he would be a guy who could maybe grind some yards out a little bit on you, but you're not going to be worried about him really like stretching the defense or breaking big plays if he comes in. And it does sound like he is behind those other two guys on the depth chart as it does stand right now for the Raiders. One last thing too is that much like we talked about the defensive side of the ball, this is also you having draft picks released for why the Raiders offensive line isn't as good. Because remember, they let Leatherwood go. Right. First round pick from 2 years ago, a guy taken off this offensive line that has weakened down them, even if he wasn't a strength in his play. That's one thing they were counting on to be before the start of the year, hopefully good. And they had to release out right at the beginning of the year. So
who was the receiver who got in the car accident and they released?
Oh, that's right. God, they've got so many of these guys. It's oh my God, I've already forgotten his name. The Alabama kid.
Yeah, it's Henry Ruggs.
Henry Ruggs. Yeah, another guy, another top 20 pick who is becoming a good receiver for you.
Yeah.
Who another guy off this roster, another piece of another talent that you had that's gone. And they're not as strong for it. And then you're getting weakened by injuries on top of it. That's why I say this is definitely a team we're catching kind of, I think, a bit at the right time, Brendan, when you consider as we have this year, we had the Chargers game. Remember, we had no Keenan Allen, no.
Well, Keenan Allen
Sean
played,
Slater.
but he barely did anything.
Yeah, he played like 4 snaps or something, and he couldn't run.
I think they had Bosa.
No Bosa as well. We had no Bosa in that game. Yep. And JC Jackson went down at one point. And Mike Williams went down at one point. And you never hope injury goes on with anybody, but we've definitely benefited a little bit this year at times of having some
Right.
catching these teams right, which I'll take it.
Yeah. For all that the Raiders have invested into receiver lately, it's weird that their number 2 is Mac Hollins and their number 3 is Keenan Cole in this game. Although Mac Hollins is actually playing all right this year, it seems like he made some plays against the Broncos that I thought were pretty good. So I don't want to completely dump on him.
No, I mean he's finding some touches there. I'm also seeing some moments though where Derek Carr's throwing and he's not trusting these guys. And I'm watching a couple of these games. I was surprised at moments with Derek in his play of him missing some of his reads. He's definitely not completely on it with how he's seeing things this year. I don't know why. Maybe it's that the pocket's getting compressed or he's not comfortable with McDaniel's offense. I'm not saying he's playing bad, so don't take it as that, but just that he doesn't always look comfortable in going through his reads. I've seen him miss some real open things, which in the past he tends to catch. He'll see that sort of stuff. So I don't know if some of that's been disrupted with it as well. But it can't help when you got an offensive line, Brendan. Remember a couple of years ago, they had Trent Brown in there. They had Rodney Hudson, Gabe Jackson. They had the Osemele in there. From the Raiders they brought in. They moved off all those guys. But
Donald
then Donald Penn. And then what have you replaced him with? Colton Miller. Yes, he's good. But what else? What else is in that line that you've really turned over from a good talent to, if you're going to move on from stuff, okay, what's the replacement now? And they really haven't done a good job in that respect of things. I think they have gotten a little bit too. It's that old Davis influence. I just can't help but think about it, Brendan. His dad Al was a big guy in receivers, probably his favorite position. Give me those long stretches of the field. Give me those long stretches of the field. They can take the top off. I like them players.
Yeah, I mean, when I played Madden back in the day, that's how I did it. I just got 99 speed receivers, and it was game over every time.
His father, Al, was exactly that way. And look, here's the thing with it. That's one of those situations where a guy gets a lot of success with doing it and then never stops going back to that well again. Because Al did great in the 70s by putting track guys out on the football field at the receiver position, essentially. And then he kept going back, more receive. We need more speed. And then you end up having that guy, remember Hayward Bay that they drafted in the top 10 out of Maryland, was specifically, and then that was all the way into the 90s or 2000s at that point with Al. That's how long that had set in Al's head as far as how much he loved the speedy wide receiving, stretching the field. It's just, it got caught into his kind of mind, but I'm sure his son probably has a few how could he not, right? He's under the same household. So he's definitely got a little bit of a predilection towards those receivers too, but it's not helping the team, I think, which is the bottom line.
Right. Big Patty Daddy, thank you for the $4.99. Shout out Park County Sheriff's Office. You guys keep me awake on the night shift. Go Hawks, Bay.
Oh, thank you, man. Go Hawks.
Like
Hell yeah.
I like it. Glad to keep you awake.
Thank you, Patty.
Okay, so let's talk about Derek Carr in a little more detail here, because there's been some talk that this is going to be the end of the line for him in Vegas. He's going to be released. Apparently, there's like a $5 million dead cap hit if he's released this offseason. So it's a decent time to get out. So overall, what do you think of Derek Carr this year?
A lot of dinking, a lot of dunking. He's coming on the heels. I'm just double checking the stats on this year. He's coming on the heels of last year throwing for a career high of 4,800 yards, only 23 touchdowns to 14 interceptions there. He's a hard quarterback to do some assessing on here, quite frankly, Brendan. And while I'll say this, it's like trying to assess some of these young quarterbacks that are fighting behind bad offensive lines. Has he been given a great offensive line to play behind there recently to really make that full assessment? Yes, you've given the guy the playmakers, but if he doesn't have the line that's going to hold up for the time for him to get the playmakers open down the football field, is that factor in? How much should that factor in? I'm not saying that I've got the answers on this, Brendan, but I think it's what does make it a little bit of a hard spot to try to make an assessment of Carr as far as where he is or who he is. I don't think he's a great quarterback. I don't think he's a guy that's been somehow like Stafford out there in Detroit, where he's just under hellacious conditions. I also think he's got some of that though there too, what's going on with a lot of coaches going through, not a lot of stabilization there, an offensive line that's kind of a little bit of muck here for a lot of years now. So I do wonder if, like, when I'm watching him not go through his reads, and I'm thinking, well, maybe he's not going through his reads a little bit because he doesn't trust his offensive line, because he's taken a lot of hits, and because he hasn't had a good offensive line. And well, what if you gave him a good offensive line? Because that's where this pushes forward to, Brendan, is if they do move off from him, where does he go? And does a team look at it through that way? I think a team would, Brendan. I think a team would say, 2 years ago threw for 4,800 yards. Get him an offensive line that can pass protect a little bit and give him some time to throw the football, and he can do some things. Oakland's not done a good job of that. He's had too many coaches. He needs a stable situation, a stable coach, and then let him go. I think Tampa Bay, if Tom goes and moves on, that's another spot that he could go to. So I think there'll be a market for him if he does. I think the Raiders will probably be, I don't know if they'll be silly for doing so. I'd say that they probably going to make a trade, right, Brendan? Because they do have him on contract. So they'll more likely than not find a trade partner. So they might come out of this smelling golden. They might do a Carson Palmer kind of situation again. Or not, a reverse of what happened to them with Carson Palmer.
Yeah, reverse Carson Palmer.
The reverse Carson Palmer.
Well, like a team that makes some sense to me would actually be the Niners, because Jimmy's off his deal at the end of this year. They've already agreed to not tag him. They can't tag him. So what if they just went, okay, we're going to move off Jimmy, but we can't trust Trey Lance because he's been in the league 2 years now and he's had devastating injury after devastating injury. We need a veteran who can who can run the Shanahan offense, somebody who doesn't get too off script, somebody who can run, it's a pretty sweet place for a quarterback to be. Like, does that make sense? I know they traded away all their draft picks, so they can't really do much there. But if he got released somehow, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I don't see how he gets released, though, because he doesn't have a no trade clause. And so he can't pull the card. I mean, he could say, I'm going to retire, I guess. That's the one thing he could do. I'm going to, if you trade me here, I'll just retire. That could be a way he goes about it. But then the Raiders could get catty too and be like, well, then pay some of your bonus money back. I don't think they would do that, but that could be a tit for tat thing. Yes, San Francisco could be a measure of a place for that at that point. They would still, I would think that there would be a situation where if he forces it to be only San Francisco, they'd have to give up something back in return to pull him in. Mm-hmm. And they're already down so many draft picks as it is. You would really wonder if they would be not very hesitant to do that. I have a creeping suspicion that Tom Brady's going to end up on the Niners next year. And I look at the fit. I look at the fact that Tampa Bay is kind of Maybe he's got some bad memories with it now with the divorce, maybe that whatever. And you look at if he went to San Francisco, and with where that line is, and with all he's got around him now, and with that defense, I mean, he's going to Tampa Bay 2.0 at that point, theoretically speaking. And if he's back to being a single guy, doesn't think about fan, like maybe we want to be far from the kids or whatever, but maybe you just be like, hell with it, I'm going in on this. And remember, Brendan, he is originally a 49er fan. He is originally from the state of California. So he has a fondness, at least in some part, for that team. So that's been more of where I thought that one was going to go when it sells out. But you're right. Niners are going to have to make a decision on the quarterback situation somewhere. And I don't think it's going to be Trey Lance.
Yeah.
Not that they're going to release him, but.
Yeah. I mean, they can't go into a season with him being their only quarterback.
No.
It can't be Trey Lance and then Brock Purdy behind him is what I'm saying.
Right. You're 100% right there. There's got to be another alternative move.
Right. But back to the Derek Carr thing, one thing I was thinking about, doesn't seem like Derek Carr responds well to getting hit. Doesn't seem like he responds well to getting pressure. He doesn't deal with pressure in the pocket well. So if we can take advantage of this weakened Raiders offensive line, obviously we're coming off one of the worst pass rush games in Seahawks franchise history last week. Literally one quarterback pressured the whole game. Yeah. They released the numbers on last Thursday. One QB pressured the whole game by Shelby Harris. And if they can get to him a few times, that's a great way to maybe end this game early. So if Colton Miller is out, there should be a good opportunity to do that. I am hopeful that I watch these games and I don't see the two-man fronts, because that has to be at least a little bit of a concern, because there was no reason to really bust it out against Tampa, and we did. And I'm just hoping we learn the right lessons from that. I think that's another thing that stands out about this game. Like, even if they don't have Jacobs, don't assume that the Raiders are just going to not run the ball the way you did against Tampa Bay. And I think that you put all that stuff together, and it's really hard for us to not have a successful game and not win.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you there. I think the reason you thought the two-man fronts would be implemented from the coaching standpoint is you thought they're going to pass the ball so much less than they did, or so much more than they did, and that was what was driving that. I think you don't look at this Raider team they've thrown 362 times. They've run the ball 222 times. So they're definitely committed to running the ball. This isn't Tampa Bay out there. We're not going to run, or we're just going to let Tom throw it all over the football field. It'd be silly to come in with that kind of strategic angle on it. I wouldn't expect us to do so, especially again, because it failed last week, as it's failed anytime they've tried to put it in this year at any point in time. So hopefully not. Hopefully they go to more of the 3-3-4. I would, Brendan, not like to see us try to blitz much in this game. And watching the film with the Raiders, that line's not very good. Other teams have been able, like a couple of the teams I watched, just came front four, were able to get the pressure in those situations when you're just trying to go for, in knowing passing situations, 3rd and long. And like you said, he's not going to trust the pocket. He's trying to get the ball out. That's why he's only averaging 7 yards an attempt, is he's just back foot, just trying to get out. Let me get it out. That's part of, again, why I think he's missing some of these reads, is there's just a rush to get it to the one place he wants to get it to. And they're certainly force feeding the hell out of Devante Adams. I mean, Adams 112 targets already this year so far. He is getting worked like a mule going up the Grand Canyon on all-day fairs. It is pretty insane to watch how much they're going to him. If I'm Brennan, from a coaching standpoint, I know this is a place that the Hawks don't like to go this route, which is leaning into double teams. But he's the one guy offensively, literally could end up being the one guy offensively that can hurt you in this game. Maybe there is a smart approach here to committing a little bit more to taking away Devante Adams and making somebody else on this Raider football team beat you on the offensive side of the ball, especially if there is no Jacobs, in regards to already there not being any Hunter Renfrow, any Darren Waller, maybe no Colton Miller. Make somebody else beat you on this football team at that point, in my opinion of it. That's why I don't want blitz too, because that gives you the extra guy to run the doubles.
Right. Speaking of Devante Adams, we got Kevin Mullen here with the $4.99. Thank you. Nick Fleming loves Diet Coke. Question: D. Adams lined up right wide receiver versus Denver and exploded for 7 out of 11 receptions. I think 11 targets, 7 receptions, 142 yards and 2 touchdowns, and was strictly left wide receiver the entire year. We worried. Well, one thing I can say, I was looking back at that Raiders-Broncos game, which is the game where Adams exploded, had his best game of the year. That final play, the walk-off touchdown that he had, Surtain was single covered on him. And I know Surtain might be the best corner in the league this year. It's possible. He's at least top 3. But I thought that was a very curious decision by Denver's defense. It almost strikes me as like arrogance. You don't have Hunter Renfrow. You don't have Darren Waller. Your offense is a shell of its former self. And you've got the only real weapon the Raiders have left in that receiver core. You've got in single coverage on one of the biggest plays of the game. You're holding on for dear life, trying to force a field goal so you still have a chance to win. And Adams just beats him badly, and it's game over. So to your point, what you were saying about double teaming Adams, yeah, that's what I would like to see as well. Now, I know we don't have a cornerback as good as Patrick Surtain, but we do have a cornerback that I know we really like. I know we generally prefer to not have to double team players, even great players. But don't let that arrogance seep into your mind to where you're like, oh, we can just put Devante Adams in single coverage. Everything's going to be fine. No, do what Holmgren did to Steve Smith in the NFC title game. Yeah. If that's what you have to do, why not? What's the difference, really?
That's very much an equivalent, Brendan, across the board. If you're talking about situation with the offense you're dealing with across from you and what you have to worry about, and that's the guy you have to worry about. I agree with you. It sounds straightforward in the way we may be saying this, folks, but there are this thing that happened with Adams being lined up one-on-one. Say nothing of the fact, Brendan, that you have a Bronco team that really is more zone-based anyway. I mean, that's Surtain's game, is more of the zone corner and how he does it. Now you're going to man-on-man him for game with Devante Adams, one of the best man-on-man burners there is in the game. It's silly, but this is what coaches sometimes, I think, do, where I don't know if it's underthinking it or overthinking it, but you break it all down, you go, just don't let the team's best, when a team is hobbled on one leg and they've got a broken rib here, and they've got blood going down their eye over here on the other side, and there's this one good paw that can get you there. They can still get them there. This one good little arm that can get them to knock that sucker out, make the other stuff go through you at that point. It sounds straightforward, but teams totally overthink this. It drives me crazy, Brendan, because It seems like just force them to do something else. And this is one of the things Belichick's done for years and had a lot of success with on teams. I'm not letting your best player beat me. Not letting you. You might beat me with somebody else, but you're not beating me with your best player. Prove that you can. And a lot of teams can't. A lot of teams don't have, especially when they're undermanned, especially when they're missing their number 2, their number 3, maybe their best offensive lineman, their best running back. I mean, there is no second answer at that point to call upon. There is no backup option. This is it. But Brendan, we love cover 2. We love cover 3. We like our cloud cover. We like cover 4. A lot of the just group-based kind of zone coverage, right? We're all going to move like we're on a string as one through it. But it's not a lot of arching the coverage towards that extra player and taking away in the double team. And that it's a little bit more different than what you do. And coaches get real nervous when you talk about these kind of situations as far as whether they're willing to do it or not.
Yeah. And I would hope that this would be a circumstance where you would call that audible, where you look at this offense and you go, if it's not Adams, it's not going to be anybody.
Yeah.
So I would love to be able to shade coverage over towards him heavily. And again, you look at what happened last week to the Broncos, who decided, no, we're not going to do that. And look where it got them. Going back in the time machine again, the Steve Smith example, the week before when the Panthers played the Bears tried to play him straight up. They tried to stick to their, I think it was the Tampa 2 defense. They're like, no, we're going to single cover him. He's just another receiver, and he destroyed them. And I got to believe Mike Holmgren was watching that and was like, okay, if we lose, we're not going to lose because of this.
Yeah. It's part of what made Mike Holmgren a great coach. Yeah, he's a great offensive mind, but he's also a guy that can look to the other side of it and say, put this mandate down on the defense and say, okay, I'm aware of this. This isn't going to happen. And this is the game where this is begging for you to do something like that, to go at it this way. And not all times can you afford to do it. There's times where you've got to play it more balanced, a little more straight up. But this is one particular game where you really don't have to do it. You really put it all together. Carr, as much as he's trying to force 100 targets plus this season already so far, Devante Adams might end up with 200 plus targets before this year is over with. Let's take that guy away. Who's the guy that Hollins? Hollins is going to beat us. Are we all worried about Hollins at that point? One-on-one on the other side of the field with open space. I'm not. I'm gonna let it ride. I'm gonna let it rip. And I hope the coaching staff does. And I think they will, Brendan, at least to a degree, even if it's just a measured like change up where they do it half the time or 3/4 the time, but commit to it to some degree. And remember, as I say on this sounds straightforward, folks, that we're also the team that has refused for a decade to double team Aaron Donald on any kind of consistent play basis, game in and game out. So as straightforward as this sounds, you could very well be sitting here on Sunday going, why do he's in single coverage. We're just going to leave Woolen out there alone. Just trust. Okay. Hopefully not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if Adams is playing on the left side primarily in this game, like he did against the Denver, wouldn't that be Michael Moore?
Yes. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what we're, what left or right, which side people call it. Technically, if you're on the offensive right side, I guess if we're talking about that, I think you're meaning the left side on the other to Carr's essentially. Okay. To his left side is what I think you're meaning on, which would be Woolen at that point, I believe. But if you're seeing to the right side, I wasn't watching the tape as closely on that where he was aligned at, so I can't speak necessarily where he was with it. But I would imagine that they would have him over on the right side in this game with Mike Jackson. I don't think they're going to try to pair him up over on Woolen. Teams are already starting to kind of throw away from him. So, but then
either way, you can double team him.
Yeah, absolutely can. Still not hard to do it. If anything, it kind of helps you a little bit if you do it there because you have the strong safety there who can kind of come into double team even on slants. He's already a few steps closer to the box. So now if a slant route comes in, it's going right at the strong safety as opposed to the free who's 6 or 7 yards more back. So he can be more in that position at that point to kind of read off of what Adams is doing off his initial route, or really provide a pure double team at that point. But then it's on kind of what you do then with Diggs is you have Diggs running a lot of the cover 3 stuff, right? Because then you'd have Diggs as your center field guy because he'd have to take care of more of that deep end of the field with Neal coming down and trying to bracket up Devante Adams on the short side of things. So then that's going to test Adams on the back end to stay clean. But again, there's not that burner. And Deshaun Jackson, I think, is on this roster, but
is he? He doesn't have a catch yet this year for him.
No,
Was it
I
he?
saw him.
No, he was on the Raiders last year. I don't think he's on the Raiders this year.
He's on somebody's team. I thought somebody signed him, but
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So I
Oh, the Ravens. Ravens.
Ravens, okay. They're both teams in darker colors there, so easy to confuse. So yeah, there's nobody there to challenge you. I feel good about that matchup with Diggs back there. I trust Woolen on the other side to hold things up. Whatever you got to do with him on whoever he's matched up with, let it roll that way.
Right. Yeah, and after Mac Hollins, by the way, their next top receiver would be Keelan Cole, who has 4 catches this year. So yeah, there's nobody there to be afraid of. The way you're going to be afraid of Adams at all. So I
Not
would
even
hope.
speed wise, not even like a burner guy, not even a guy that's like, well, he has no production, but at least he's a 4-3 guy who can still take the top off if you're leaning over to Adams one way. This guy's going to break it up over. He can still do that. No, you don't even have threat of that. You can stay with these guys step for step up with a football field.
Al Davis rolling around in his grave, not a single receiver that can take the top off.
Yeah, he's mad at his son, but he's not too mad because he digs what he's been doing with the receiver position. So it's
Yeah.
a slight turning in his grave. He's turning on his side. It's not a
Mhm.
full 360.
William Leonard, thank you for the $5. If the Hawks were to seriously go for it all in next year for the championship,
Woo!
what exactly can we expect to look for? What would that look like?
Mm.
Well, there's a lot going on in this one.
Yeah,
There's
there
a
is.
lot going on to this question. Um, I mean, you're going to have some money next year, but you're not going to have a ton. But I would say you're probably looking to find a veteran interior offensive lineman, probably a center,
Mhm.
because I don't think Blythe is good enough because he can't run block.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of putting this one together in my mind a little bit, William, because I don't think you can answer it just like you'd answer it like, well, we'll do what the Rams did. I don't think number one, I don't know if monetarily wise you got the money to work with, knowing that there's probably a change of ownerships within the next couple of years.
Yeah,
So
you don't.
it's just not realistic to say, well, we could spend our money here and we'll spend our money there. The other thing is that we do have a track record with Schneider and Carroll having a Super Bowl ready roster and what they did at that point. What were the moves they made? How far all into it did they go? Now they did go for it, I would say, William. They were willing to expend future capital, the Percy Harvin trade, the Jimmy Graham trade. They're obviously willing to do that when they're willing to go all in. Hell, even the Jamal Adams trade. So when we talk about it, it's not about how they spend money. It's about, I think, how they necessarily potentially mortgage a future pick for the now. And when I think about it, I do think, like you do, that somehow or another you would find the veteran offensive lineman, William. It seems like Damian settling into left guard. You can find the cheap right guard somewhere in free agency, so you don't have to do that as an all-in move. You make a trade maybe for a veteran stabilized presence there on the center position. Then you're able to go a little more heavy defense in the draft. I think then you would make a trade for another, maybe be it could be any kind of insert X player, a wide receiver, um, uh, another defensive lineman. It could be put anything in at that point. You then could go make that Harvin like trade, which wouldn't be maybe a first rounder, maybe it'd only be a second rounder, like for the future, then to bring a guy in, or a third rounder in the future to bring a guy in at a start of training camp or midway through after you get through free agency a little bit. Those would be the kind of moves that would be more about the aggression with future draft capital and how you bring things in. And even at its most aggressive, William, it would still be about 85% to what the Rams are doing on their aggressive side of things. We'll never go to that degree with Schneider and Carroll here that far all into it. It would be a little measured, even if it was aggressive. But the good news to me, William, is that they are willing to at least be reasonably aggressive if they're in the right state of things. Think about that Percy Harvin trade, right? Brendan, that was an aggressive trade to make
Oh
with
yeah.
what you had on the roster and where you were at. I mean, you had receivers on the roster. You were at a position you were fine theoretically. So they will do something like that if they think they're in it. But I would think it would be something like that. Probably a defensive player to just top the defense off, to just make it supreme. That would be what I would say. But it would be a big swing move on all the other draft picks we bring in and whatever we're able to kind of pull through in free agency.
Yeah, I would be cautious about pushing all in next year, I think, just because you're probably going to have 4 picks in the top 60,
Mhm.
including probably it's looking like 3 picks in the top 35, the way
Mhm.
things are going. So you're going to get rookies
Mhm.
who are probably going to be good enough to start, but we know the saying, right? For every rookie your team starts, that's another loss. Like, I would be a little cautious about let's go all in on a team that's also going to have a bunch of rookies starting. Because if you do get Will Anderson, he's going to start. if you do get a player like Jarrett Patterson on the offensive line, the center, he's going to start. And
How
I would
many?
just be,
Sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
But no, what I'm saying is just, do you want to go all in and then have a significant portion of your team be starting rookies is what I'm saying. I'm not sure it's the right time because of all the young talent you're going to bring in this offseason.
Right. It would hinge for me on one decision only, on whether I would or wouldn't, Brendan. If you're going to bring Geno Smith back into the building on a multi-year deal, then that's a signal to me that you go in this direction. If you're going to go for another quarterback or a rookie quarterback or a young guy, then no, you wouldn't do that. But if Geno's signed, then we're in the now. We are the here and now. We're going for it now. You don't sign that Geno contract unless you're trying to go for Super Bowls here with Geno. Otherwise, it's just it's a move to be in a middling state if you don't have the faith to get there with him, or get into just a mere playoff state at your best, which I don't think that's the mark they're shooting for. So if you sign Geno, I think you do have to go for it. And I guess I would ask Geno, how many of those, you say your cost for a game for every rookie, how many games does Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas and Kenneth Walker and Boye Mafe cost us this year in their play? I would say, I don't think they're net. They don't think they've been a net negative as far as how many games they've cost us for how many games they've brought us. And
yeah, that's true.
And when I think about, first off, when I think about rookies starting, you don't tend to get rookies starting where there are 3 of them picked in the top 36. And that you're able to get a lot better players, a lot more certain players, theoretically speaking, and picking that high than when you're later in the draft trying to start those rookies, even into like what we're doing with Cross in the 3rd or 4th round. I would say there's a very big difference in those two. So then the last part I'll say on that too, Brendan, is that the guys you bring in may be guys that are able to fit in as roles, that aren't being asked to necessarily start per se, but have like a Boye Mafe effect where, okay, you're our early down run defender and we'll sprinkle you in for some pass rushing snaps, and then building that onto the team. And that being, again, is it a net negative or is it a net plus, having those 4 picks in the next 2 rounds for next year's team on the performance of the field versus what we have now? I think it's a net plus. And if it's a net plus, that means it's a better team than what we are right now. We got more money to spend next year. Geno's in point. I think you do go for it at that point. Don't sign Geno though, then no. But yeah, I think we got to go kind of all in at that point and say, okay, the team's ready to roll. And I know you're saying, you're right, there are going to be some lumps you take, but I think that you've got so much also that you're adding to these guys. They're not carrying the day. They're not being asked to be the stars of the team. Even in the way that Lucas and Cross are kind of being asked to do, and Walker's being asked to do this year. You're not going to put that same heaping on their shoulders.
Yeah, that's all actually. That makes a lot of sense. I would just, my hang up, I guess, would just be, just as an example, Will Anderson. We know that he has no technique at all. He is winning completely on his physical traits. He has no idea what he's doing out there. He's just better than everyone else. How's a guy like that going to be as a rookie in the NFL? Like, because we'll talk about this more in a second, but it's becoming very possible we end up with him. If he's the guy, do you look at that and go, oh, this is a guy who can help us on our path to the Super Bowl this year? Or do you look at him and go, yeah, this first year is going to be very Aaron Curry-like, and then he's going to year 2, year 3 become the stud?
Well, it's a great example on your part to bring up, because I think it does illustrate a little bit of the point, exactly what I'm saying here. You bring a guy like that in here, you already have Uchenna Nwosu, Boye Mafe, Darrell Taylor for wherever he's at, and Alton Robinson wherever he's at. So you have 4 guys with a lot of NFL experience on this football club right now. You have a guy in Uchenna that you know what you're getting with him as a starter. You don't know exactly what you're getting with Boye and Darrell, but I would imagine the combination between them two is relatively productive for them coming off the left side and just their combination of totality. So you bring him in. Are you asking him to start day one? Are you saying, like Trayvon Walker's being asked to do with Jacksonville, or Aiden Hutchinson's being asked to do with Detroit, you're gonna run 600 snaps for us this year? No, you're not. You're going to ask him to run 250, 300 snaps. You're going to tell him to play with his hair on fire. You're going to say, go hunt, young man. And that's, if you can do that and put him in a position to succeed. I go back to, again, the old axiom. This was what Carroll was famous for with USC, which one of the ways he was able to recruit guys in as freshmen and get them into the program. What jump-started it was coaches would not play freshman players. It was that, oh, well, you play him, you're going to lose a guy. Same thing that Bud Grant once told him. But he would go and find freshman players and he'd say, okay, I'm not going to start you, but I'm going to find you a role and you'll have an impact in that role, because I'm not blinding you with all this information and checks with me at the line and know this audible. No, you just do this thing I'm going to have you set to this path. You go on that path and you'll be in a position to succeed. That's what they're doing to me with Boye Mafe, for instance, this year. And that's what you can do, I think, with the young guys you bring back in and how you go forward with them. And so a guy like Will Anderson, if he plays 300 snaps, yeah, I think he can give me 8 or 9 sacks his first year. Healthy, fresh, coming in always ready to go, knowing he's not having to run too many snaps his rookie year because we're trying to squeeze every last bit that we can get out of him in that rookie season. Yeah, I do. I do think he could help you get there. As I think wasn't Joey Bosa in his first year coming out as the number 1 pick when they got to the Super Bowl in 2019?
I think he was the number 2 overall pick because the number 1 was Kyler. And then you're right, the Niners went to the Super Bowl that year. I think you're right.
So I think you can bring a guy like in that, and even if he's not at his refined best, he's so freakish as far as his quickness and speed off the line and what he does do, even as raw as he is with his tools, that he's going to give you some measure of production at that point. He's going to help you out.
Yeah, and I guess the nice part is we don't necessarily need a ton of stuff to get to that level. We need a lot less than we thought. So you're looking at it and you're going, you probably need a defensive lineman because the defensive line is kind of bleh. Maybe you're going to need another safety depending on what happens with Jamal and Quandre. I don't know about that, but it's really not too bad. There are some things you can probably do in the draft that are fine. Like you could get Cody Barton's replacement in the draft. He wouldn't be on the field that much necessarily anyway. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's certainly doable. I would just definitely be cautious about deciding that this is the time to go for it. But you're right. If you do re-sign Geno, I guess you're kind of committed to it.
Yeah, I think it does hinge it at that point. Because if you're signing Geno to just kind of stay competitive, I might make the argument then that more should educate you then to, as the front office should more educate you towards going, no, then we need to go rookie because we're not really committed to Geno. We don't have the belief that he's going to take us to the promised land at that point. It's you kind of hedging your bets to me, Brendan. And remember, the worst place that I think a football team can get is in that in-between place. The very team, the team we're playing right now this week is in that same place right now. They've been in this in-between place for years. Can't decide if they want to be good or bad. Can't kind of just get it fully rebuilt. Always kind of just good enough to be mediocre and middle of the road. And if you make that kind of signing for Geno, but then don't go all in, as all these teams around you are going all in, including your own division, I don't know how you can hope to ever really get to that promised land at that point. It does take that in this day and age. This is the price of doing business in the modern NFL if you want to be a Super Bowl contending team.
I agree. And, as someone who's a big advocate for us going all in, a couple years ago, if we do keep Geno, then just on that basis alone, you're kind of compelled to, or else what was the point? You're right about that.
Yeah. Are you in favor of that, by the way? I mean, at the end of the day, do you still find yourself aligned with let's go for Geno? I could trust him to get me there if I gave him that roster.
Unless we get the number 1 pick. Unless we get the number 1 pick from Denver.
That would be hard not to go for quarterback there, wouldn't it?
Then I'm getting CJ Stroud and feeling good about it. But
I mean,
otherwise,
it's so ridiculous a turn of fate at that point. It's just like, it's like God handing you a quarterback, Oh, there he goes.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we should spend a minute on that. We got the Toilet Bowl this week as well. We've got the Panthers and the Broncos.
Oh, Lordy.
This is the last obstacle to our pick getting as high as it can get.
So tasty. Mm-hmm. Just get that pick's finger looking good right now.
Yeah. I said this in one of my streams the other day. It's like if before the season started, somebody told you this is the way it was going to go, you would dismiss it as like poorly written fan fiction. Like, really, Denver's going to be a bottom 5 team? Denver's going to be a bottom 3 team? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. No,
it didn't make any sense.
We would have been flamed like hell if we even tried to push that. I didn't have it even crossed my brain. I did think there was a good chance it couldn't work because of some things that were set up for Russell in the way that this put together, where he's at in his game. But even in my worst case scenario, I still saw them as at least carving out 6-7 wins, even on their downside of where they could be. Like they would at least pull that through. And right now, this Carolina game, like you just said, this is their last pathway to a win, really, realistically speaking, over the course of the rest of this year, unless the Rams are just that bad as they've been and they remain in that place. And even this, as bad a place as the Rams are, I still think they could handle this Bronco team as it currently stands. So this is it for them. I
Yeah.
mean, this is last chance.
Yeah, I don't know. That Rams team is bad. Like I looking at their advanced numbers, like they can't move the ball at all. Now they don't have a quarterback, they don't have a receiver. Like there's nothing that team does that is particularly good. Even Aaron Donald, I was looking at the numbers. He's on pace for like 21 pressures this year. He's
Yeah.
basically a slightly better version of Quentin Jefferson this year, in terms of rushing the passer.
Yeah, it's definitely shows you why it's hard to get the back-to-back Super Bowls, right? Like you
Yeah.
get you make that run and it's just you are expended. You shot your stack, and they're definitely probably at this point showing a little bit of that. I mean, even Cooper Cup injury that he has where he finally goes down, and it's like, yeah, the amount you guys have used him over the last year and a half, who could have ever seen this coming? You know, with the high ankle sprain, it's like, yeah, that's definitely. So maybe they are, but again, the Broncos are in a place too, Brendan, where they can't score 19 points for a football game. I mean, what would they be? I think they'd be 9-1 this year if they scored 18 points every game
In regulation,
in
yes.
regulation. Yeah. Because well, you don't get to OT if they score the 19 points in, in the
Right.
game. So it's like, yeah, it's their record would be there. And you keep having to feel like, if I don't know how you feel like this, but knowing defenses that have had these kind of years with offenses on the other side of it, there does come a point where it like starts to just break down. And maybe that Devante Adams play against the Raiders this last week was the point where the defense starts to go, okay, it's Cabo time. Like we're
Yeah.
done holding this thing into holding this dam and the waters back while the offense keeps punching new holes out along the track of it over and over again. Maybe not. I mean, they played they played out of their mind this year so far, but it is tough, man. It's a long year and it starts to wear on you where every game your offense just can't go out there and do anything. It's 3-and-outs and your quarterback is turning into a meme at every turn.
Yeah, I mean, as good as they did play for most of that game, what happened at the end there was kind of snatches your manhood a little bit, right? Raiders
Mhm.
get the ball, no timeouts, a minute 30 left. They march down the field immediately. They almost get a touchdown to win the game.
Yeah.
They actually had three cracks at the end zone from 5 yards out. And then they get the ball in overtime, and 3 plays later, 70 yards in the end zone. Like there is something about that felt like, okay, is that the moment where the defense decided, screw it?
Yeah. I'm sure it isn't. I mean, I'm sure there's other things, but it does feel that way. And it's at home, Brendan. It's against an AFC West rival there in that it just and it's been this kind of year where there does feel like there may be a breaking point on that with it. And look, this Carolina team, the Denver Broncos are going up against this week, have a better defense than what that Carolina Panther defense is by, or the Raider defense is by a very good long margin. Now, offensively, they don't
Yeah.
provide the same challenges, but it's not going to be any more easy sledding for Russell this week, going into Carolina on the road.
Hmm.
Could be a tough one. That pick I saw we have it's I think 6% chance right now for the number 1 overall pick is what it currently
Right.
stands with the odds.
Yeah, I'm not really thinking about the top one. I'm not thinking about number one
Dream
overall that
big, Brendan.
much.
Come on, dream
I
big.
mean, I am dreaming big, but Houston, they've just mastered the art of the semi-competitive loss.
They have, yeah. It's hard to see them getting even one more win this year. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, they play the Jags and they play the Colts, and they already beat the Jags and they already tied the Colts. So it's possible.
It's possible. We'll see how it breaks out, but I'm with you. I think they're benching Mills now. Maybe
Yeah.
that'll do it. Don't they have is it Tyrod Taylor there? Who's down there as the backup?
No, I think it's another like guy who hasn't played that much in his career. I can't remember.
Okay.
But yeah, so just to sum it up here real quick, what do you think happens in the toilet bowl this weekend? Panthers, Broncos in Carolina, Sam Darnold. Luckily, we're a long way away from Halloween, so there aren't going to be any ghosts that he's going to see. But
Yeah.
do you think he can get the win?
No, I don't think he can. I think Darnold has too much of a penchant to throw a couple of interceptions, and he'll throw the Broncos. Maybe the Bronco defense just goes out and scores 14 points on their own. They're just like, the hell with it. We'll score the points. We'll do it ourselves. And so I do think their defense holds it down, but I think Darnold's just got that predilection to throwing picks every single game he plays. He doesn't see the field clear. He's not a processor. I don't like what he does from the quarterback position at all. And yeah, if this was almost a PJ Walker, I would. This is the funny part. If this was PJ Walker playing Brendan, I would give Carolina the game. I think they'd be in better stance to win this game, but because it's Sam Darnold, I think it's a loss.
What about Baker?
No, No.
You
Did
would
you see the
you
guy headbutting? Did you see him headbutting guys a couple weeks ago? Literally headbutting guys with their helmets on, with his helmet off, by the way. His helmet's off, and there's a row of his offensive linemen going down the field, and he's literally headbutting them. I don't know why. And the final offensive lineman's like, bro, what are you doing? Chill. Like, all of them are for as he's going down the line, and he's like,
yeah.
like, no. Darn. Baker has shown you why he wouldn't have been a good pickup for this year. He's shown you why I've overhyped guys since day one on that. Day one.
Yeah. Is Baker from a wealthy family, by the way? Because we were talking about this the other day in regards to a Zach Wilson, because he is. And if
Mm.
you look at the way his attitude has just completely turned that locker room against him already, and I'm kind of looking at Baker and I'm seeing some of the same kind of traits, and I'm wondering if there's some sort of correlation there.
I don't know on Baker to answer your question on that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I describe it to that. It could be that. It's possible. I push it more in the line of you have these 5-star athletes that are coddled, and they're coddled throughout the course of their life. They're coddled and sometimes all the way back into junior high, and told that their stuff doesn't stink, and that they ride on clouds and they're above everything. And then, they don't get anybody telling them the reality of things and how the world really works until they finally arrive at the pro level. And then once you arrive at the pro level, like a guy like Baker, you're taking number 1 overall in the draft and everybody's throwing commercials at you. It's not like you're really taking much of that humble pie at that point. You're still just like, well, those are just haters out there, just the haters. That's why people just don't see it. They're just hating. It's like, no, your game sucks and you need to get better or you're not good enough. And so I do align it to that. I think something could be said for the same thing with a guy like Wilson, where there's some similarities there. I think in that respect of things, where it's a little bit of that cocky attitude, a little bit to how they go about it. But some of it could be to your point that definitely, we've all known our share of rich kids growing up that were definitely a bit of a pill to deal with. And when he's standing up at that press conference and they're saying, is this not on? Do you feel bad to the defense a little bit there? As I heard another pundit say, that's a reporter throwing you an underhanded softball question, put it up there in the cheap seats, yeah, it's on me. I got to play better. I let the team down, blah, 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 blah. I mean, this stuff is just, it's patented stuff that you know what to say. You don't have to even think about it, right? This is the Russell Wilson things where you just say this stuff and makes you look good. You don't even have to think it. The reporters get it as their little quotation and everybody reads about it and you look altruistic and completely like you're taking the head. So it's him not doing that in that moment and not showing the wherewithal to understand that.
Yeah.
It is worthy to I think the real point of what you're saying with is that moment gives you an insight into the kid and his responsibility and where he sees it with that. And it explains, I think, a little bit better, Brendan, why you've not seen development in his game. I pointed this with Russell at times. When you hear him talk and they speak about stuff that's not going right in their game, the stuff that they've done wrong, and they go, yeah, maybe I hold on to the ball too much, and they throw that but on there, but I make a lot of great plays. Hey, Russell, why don't you you don't wear the armband? Yeah, I don't wear the armband, but I've won a lot of games not wearing armbands. Then he wears an armband the next day. You got to have the responsibility aspect and accountability aspect at the quarterback position almost as much as any position on the football field, because there are those players across the board staring at you going, are you going to own this? Or are you just going to slide past this? You threw for 77 yards, my man. 77 yards. Yes, it's you. You're the one that let it rip. We're all in this elevator. You let it rip. We heard you. Heard your butt cheeks slapping when you let it rip. We know it's you. Own it. It was me.
Yeah. I mean, like the OG example for me is Manziel. That was the ultimate example of a kid who, came from money and just felt like, he was immortal because of what he did in college and high school, and got to the pros, and what happened.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I think the money is definitely a part that can affect, and I've certainly met my share of folks people I've known that have come from that. And that's been a problem. And look, Brendan, you take that and then you combine it with that 5-star thing, right? You combine that Manziel and then he's a 5-star on top of it. And it's like head already big and now head's like this. So there's probably something to it. I think that it's something that I wouldn't let necessarily color my evaluation of a player coming out of college. If I've got a player, well, he came from a rich background, as opposed to looking for some guy that's come from eating dirt through the first 10 years of his life. And that's the one I want to get. It speaks to the guy who can overcome that and has had to go through that. But I wouldn't let that itself be enough to like knock me off the path, because it really is about who's raising and who's the family and how they're being brought up and some of that too. But I agree, you do get your people that when they go that route. I think you could have seen the warning signs though, Brendan, which is another thing to your point on this. Guy like Wilson, we don't get to do these interviews when we're doing the evaluation process. It's the place I always say is our hole in our process, because we don't get to sit down and talk to these guys who really feel. We don't have investigators doing the PI stuff. Jets did. Jets would have gotten enough of a feel for this guy. In fact, I think there was even a point where he was about to get sat down at BYU prior to the start of his year, because he was just not on point with what the coach was wanting him to do. And then he finally kind of turned it on, but there was still even that question. I mean, that's a warning thing to me on a guy that I'm going to take top 5 in an NFL draft. I don't want to take a quarterback that was just about to be set down the year before he comes out. That would be just a huge like warning, no.
Yeah, still kind of breaks my heart. He's got such a good arm. His arm is beautiful.
He does, but he's also a little undersized. He's also had some injuries already. I've told you about these 6'1" guys that get the hell beat out of them in the modern day game. And every one of them, even if they've only played a handful of games, will always end up getting injured somehow, some way, because they're just not very big. And he does hold the ball for a very long period of time, Brendan. And his game in a lot of ways is only getting worse. He's holding the ball longer now than he did when his rookie year.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of regressing going on, and it didn't start out from a good spot to regress even further backwards.
Yeah, watching these Jets games, sometimes it really looks like all the quarterbacks got injured and the punters out there. Like the old, what was the guy? Tommy Tupo?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a famous YouTube where he came out, he was balling. That game, remember how that game went?
So they lost, but he threw 2 touchdowns, right?
Do you remember why they lost? Yeah, he did. He got taken out though. He went in, threw 2 touchdowns, and then at one point got taken out later on in the game. And
I think I remember this now. I think this is all coming back to me. That was the Parcells.
That was Parcells. That's right.
Yeah, Vinny Testaverde got hurt.
Vinny got hurt.
Tupo went in. No, wait. Did the backup go in first and get hurt?
No, you're right. Tom came in, started throwing dimes. Dimes. I mean, this punter came in, folks. You can go watch the highlights on this. It's on. Somebody did a cut up of it. It's a great little bit to watch. But then one Seahawks fans will recognize this name. One Rick Meyer came in and took over for Tom Tupa somewhere, I think, into the 4th quarter, and I think either fumbled or threw a pick 6. I can't remember which one. One of the two. One of the two on that. But yeah, Meyer lost the game for the punter.
Yeah.
That really happened.
I mean, Zach Wilson doesn't even look that good. I mean, he doesn't look anywhere near as good as Tupa looked that day. But the point is, like, it literally looks like a punter or wide receiver playing out of position, because he just looks so lost.
Yeah. I agree. No development there. And that's, again, this does come down to accountability. You're not going to look this lost, this out of depth. You're not going to continue to look this depth or look worse than you looked when you first walked in the door. If you're doing the hard work, or what we've talked about with Geno Smith, the lonely work, the stuff in the middle of the night where there's only one light in office and it's all dark and you're just running through tape. It's that type of work that is what bears out some of the lack of would be less confusion and more of a certainty where he's going and going more with the ball in the right place. But that's not what you're seeing in Wilson's game. And it's uncertainty, or when he wants to go the ball in the right place, he can't put the ball accurately there. And he couldn't throw a flat route last week. I think I saw him throw a flat route 10 yards over the running back's head on a flat route. Like, you can't hit that. Like, that's too much. It's going to be tough. It's going to be an uphill battle for our Mr. Wilson here into the future, I think.
Yeah, I'd prefer he just get out of the NFL as soon as possible so I can stop thinking about that horrific draft miss I had, because he was one of the guys I was really into.
You weren't alone. He had a lot of guys that are NFL analyst guys looking at him that fell in love with him and would even say, as far as there was a lot of guys even making the claim that he was the best quarterback in that particular draft of those collection of guys. So plenty of people were in that same boat as you in that respect of things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be I'm going to be continually reminded of my Jalen Reagor one, because he made a catch for the Vikings last night. So he's not going anywhere, it looks like. But I'm going to be reminded of that one for a while. Well, I love Jalen Reagor.
That one's on my miss list too. So I join you on that one. I was out on Wilson, but I was definitely in on Reagor. I liked him a lot.
We all have our draft misses, I guess.
We do.
You can't help it when you are doing it every year for hundreds of players. What are you going to do?
No, it's going to happen in this thing. You just hope to get more right than you get wrong, and especially way more right if you can than you get wrong.
But so I actually agree with you. I do think Denver gets their final win of the year this week. I do think
Yes.
they lose out after. I
Yes.
think the Rams find a way. I think the Cardinals find a way. And then they've got two against the Chiefs, they've got the Chargers, and they've got the Ravens. So there really aren't that many opportunities for them to even have a chance at a fifth win at that point. But 4-13 with a relatively decent I should say middling strength of schedule, probably lands you around pick 5 or 6, I would guess, which probably won't be enough for a Will Anderson, but it might be enough for Miles Murphy, Jalen Carter, or Brian Breeze. Maybe
Mhm.
who else is there? Keely Ringo,
Ringo.
if you want to go that route, which I'm not crazy about, but let's talk about it.
Yeah. Ringo's good.
Um, Probably not any of the tackles. You don't need any of those. There are some tackles in this draft who are really nice, like a Skoronski.
Mm-hmm. No,
But
you wouldn't want to go that route. That's unless you're looking to kick him like into guard. Even then, I wouldn't want to do it. Take a guy that move him out of position
yeah,
top 10.
but
You kind of mentioned the early ones that are. There's some other guys out there, but that in that tier 1 for sure phase of things. And at least some of the guys I've looked at, I think those are really the only list. Even a Brian Breeze is on the kind of outer edge of that, I think. To me, you would be driven towards the defensive side of the ball as I take a look at this right now, Brendan, the way this will
yeah,
bear out. I do think you end up at 3 or 4 with the pick when it's all said and done. I think 2 quarterbacks go in the first 3 picks. I think Will Anderson goes probably 3. And I think if you're looking like an early front runner to me of who we end up landing at and who's the just one that just makes a lot of sense, it's Jalen Carter. That's the one that's sitting there. That's the one that is for a need for the position. He's worthy of that pick. People have some questions about his level of production, but that Georgia defense is a little bit weird, and that it's a team. It's really talented, but it's a team-based defense. That's how you end up with Trayvon Walker running 5 tech the majority of the year last year, yet ending up as the number 1 overall pick last year, right? Even though he didn't have the Aiden Hutchinson production per
right.
se. So, I think that's the guy who just ends up being the easy peasy one for the Hawks to pull the trigger on at that point if they're the guy standing there. Murphy's a guy I think is another possibility, but have you seen any other guys that I know we're early into the scouting process. I know I've got a couple of names to look at, but I don't see, if we're talking tier 1, we may have a lower tier 1 group this year, Brendan. We may have only like 11, 12 guys in tier 1 this season.
Well, I mean, the other guys I would consider taking that high are not guys we need, like Skornonski, the
Yeah.
tackle. And
Yeah.
there's another tackle who I think is going to go really high as well. But there might be a receiver or two, but I wouldn't go that route either. So, yeah, I think you're basically looking at, assuming you pick in that 3 to 7 range, and it's not Will Anderson, Carter,
Murphy.
Breeze, Murphy, and maybe Ringo. And that's it. I wouldn't take Trenton Simpson until like after 10.
Yeah, I wouldn't do Simpson into probably to late teens. You could trade back and get him, I think, in the late teens. Maybe
Yeah,
he's driven up by the Micah Parsons effect might push him up. But I think you could get away with that.
right. But still a pretty sweet place to be, right? We didn't think we were going to have this conversation before the year started, I don't think.
No, we had no idea we were going to be at this spot. And yes, it's going to absolutely be a player that we're going to do some dives on this, Brendan, but I've even done some initial looks at recent history. And I've long been suspecting that the NFL draft and NFL teams are getting better about finding these top end players, about the tier 1 guys. And it's a group that can go a lot of times to 15. A lot of fans think of it as being 32 players. You never have 32 players in the tier 1 group. Tier
Right.
1 group is tier 1 for a reason. It's guys that are those guys that can get on the football field and play good right from the jump. And I think that having another shot to get that another tier 1 guy in this draft, adding onto that team along with the 3 other picks that are into then tier 2, is really going to help this team out. You're going to have a great player you're adding on. And if you end up with Jalen Carter, you're getting a game wrecker down from the inside. Miles Murphy might be a game wrecker kind of from the down on the inside as a 3-4 defensive end. So both of those guys would be legitimate. They would be, Brendan, there would be none of that. They're going to lose you a game next year stuff. You put them in that rotation. Miles Murphy and Jalen Carter are better than Quentin Jefferson right now, are better than Brian Monet right now, are better than Puna Ford right now. I mean, they're right now better than what you're getting out of those guys. Absolutely. So you're going to be a better team with them on the football field, as long as, of course, they can stay healthy their rookie year.
Right. Any concern about Clint Kubiak maybe working his magic on that Denver offense? They did look a little bit better in that game.
I mean, they played so badly, Brendan. Wilson's he's this bad. Like that stat I gave about the 18 points a game, 19 points a game, and 9-1. Like your offense has been worse in the league. He's playing like the worst quarterback in the entire league.
Oh yeah,
He can't stay at that place. He's not that guy. I can't think he's that bad. So I do think that, he does find a way back through, but I don't think Kubiak's got some secret sauce. I think the armband thing is going to help him more than anything else, Brendan. I think being able to reduce down, that's going to give him more time at the line of scrimmage. It's like this begrudging thing you're forcing on him from the Denver coaching staff on Russ, but it's like, it will help you, Russ. This is something that's going to get you up there, and you're now going to be able to assess things, because that's a big part of it. Not only the delay of game penalties from Brendan, it's the getting up to the line of scrimmage and being able to then see what the defense is doing. Because if I got to come to the line of scrimmage with 4 seconds versus 9 seconds, 10 seconds, that's going to adjust not only me seeing things, but whether or not I can audible or change protections to then clean things up. So, that'll help that out a little bit to a marginal degree, but it's not going to save him this year,
Yeah. We'll talk more about this at the end of the year probably, but overall, like this year has to be like the rock bottom moment that Wilson needed to realize I need to change the way I'm doing things, right? Like he's had bad moments before. Last year I don't think he played very well. Obviously
Mhm.
last year he had a losing record and all these other things. He had some moments that were embarrassing, but it wasn't like bad. Like
Yeah.
this should be the rock bottom moment where he goes, "Okay, no more celebrity stuff this offseason. I'm going to use the armband. I'm going to lock myself in a room with a bunch of tape until I figure out how to read a defense. I'm going to do all these things that I need to do. Like I know it's not rock bottom for somebody like you or me. For me, rock bottom would be, drinking out of the sewer, living in a cardboard box. Like he still has a good life, but football wise, this has to be like rock bottom for him, right?
I think it does because of his aspirations, even post football career. He's looking at not only is he looking right now at his football mortality life facing him in the face, he's looking at his, the big, I'm worried about my brand. I'm worried about my legacy. Your legacy right now is that with this season, you're making people rethink whether or not you're a Hall of Fame quarterback. And I'm not saying this is making me rethink, or I'm changing my view of Russell post view. I'm saying this is the way this is starting to turn. And if that is what's most important to you in a lot of respects that you've shown it is, you've got to figure that you're going to want to try to take every step you can to correct it. I've long said with Russell, it's not throwing shade at him. And it's for the people out there that still love Russell Wilson. This is something that should give you a little bit of encouragement in the respect of he can fix all of these things in his game. They are fixable, Brendan.
Oh
But
yeah.
it does take the responsibility thing. It's one of those things that's, again, easier said than done. If a guy doesn't take responsibility, he's never going to fix him. If he's always going to say, yeah, but, okay, yeah, I know I held on to the ball, but, yeah, okay, I know I take some bad sacks, but, okay, yeah, there's this and that, but what about that beautiful moon ball I threw? It's got to stop with the buts, and it's got to start with, I got to get better at pre-snap. I got to get better at recognizing the blitz. I've got to have more control at the line of scrimmage in what I'm seeing. I've got to get better in the short and intermediate passing game. I've got to throw with better anticipation. These things are all things he can absolutely control, have nothing to do with physical diminishings. And if he does, he can do it. And Brendan, he's got a guy in Peyton Manning and John Elway. If I was Russ, I would pull those 3 guys into the room, sit down with me, get a bottle of whiskey out on the thing and have them just break me down. You guys fix me. What do I need to do in my game right now? Let's go step by step. You both love the Broncos. I'm on the Broncos. Tell me how to get this going in the right path. I will dump all of my ego right now. Here it is. It's all dumped here. All my pride out here. I just want to get better. And if he gets to that state, he can fix and correct this. And if the Broncos build more of an offensive line that can build, protect and pass protection, they can get him there quicker too. He can still be a very productive player, but it will take that, Brendan. And he has got to show the willingness to go there, not just say he'll go there or make it all talk. You got to, see it.
Yeah, and that's why I've been saying, like, if he doesn't have a big bounce back year next year, then I guess he just doesn't really care that much. Because if this year is not evidence that you need to do that, then nothing ever will be. And at that point, you
Agreed.
just have to say, I guess he just doesn't really care that much anymore because he's got his ring, he's got his money, he's got a good life. And I guess he's just okay with that. Now, I don't think any Denver fans would be okay with that, with him basically turning into Vince Carter after he signs with them. But like these things should be fixable. You're absolutely right about that. These things are absolutely fixable. And if he doesn't fix them, I think that has to make you reevaluate the way you look at him.
It just seems like I'd be interested. Do you feel the same way? It just feels like 2020. right out the card Bills game, there's just a bit of like, you had this burning fire at that time. That's Wilson in the form of the fire in his game. And it just seems like it's just dimmed. And I'm not talking physical skill set, everything, just the passion for the game hasn't, when I watch body language and the way he goes about his business out there, just doesn't seem in the same lane. And this is a little bit to your point on him maybe being a little bit comfortable, and maybe it's that same fire isn't quite there. I mean, it would happen to the best of us. We've been on top for 10 years. We're all going to get a little bit fat and happy and placated and not going as hard, not grinding as tough. I mean, it's just, that's human nature at play. And I don't know if it's that. I mean, we don't know for sure on any of this, but we're just, it does seem to be a little bit of the sense of things a little bit here. Do you feel that as
Yeah.
well?
It's so hard to know. It's so hard to know. I think we're
Yeah.
gonna know. I think we're gonna find out this offseason, though. Like, I can say I don't know now, but after next year, I think I will know, because again, either he fixes this stuff and we know that he cares, or he doesn't, and we know that he's just content where he is.
Yeah. Agreed.
Mumbles, thank you for the $5. Man, Thanksgiving comas are really something, huh? Got to show Brendan some love. Can't wait for our bounce back win after that tough Raider loss. I think he means Bucks loss. But I've lately done a pretty good job of not eating so much that I make myself sick later. So I don't do the food coma that much, I don't think.
Yeah, it's not as much a problem for me either because I'm a picky eater. So I don't eat most of what's on the turkey up on the Thanksgiving table, and so I'm already kind of half through. My problem is going into the sugar stuff, because then you get the pies out, and that's where I'll get in trouble. Get me them.
Yeah. Well, I actually had a very streamlined and simplified Thanksgiving dinner. I don't do turkey because I think turkey's boring. I do prime
It is
rib.
boring. Oh, okay.
I
There
do
you go.
prime rib, just mashed potatoes, asparagus, and that's it.
That's not bad. All right, I
Yeah.
could go with that. I could rock with that.
Yeah.
So I'm not a big turkey guy either. Turkey's
Mhm.
overrated.
It's boring. There's not much to it.
Yeah, there really isn't. It's just a flavorless meat.
Mumbles, thank you for the $5. Wilson just needs the Broncos audibles on an armband. Hope he can bounce back next year, and I do mean next year. Yeah. Yeah. Did you buy that one? The Audible story?
No,
Yeah, I didn't either.
I don't. Here's the problem with it. The problem is that you have a situation like the start of the year where he's using hand signs that he used in Seattle, not just using a second year on a new team, but he's using the same hand signs against his old team in the first game of the year. And if he's willing to do that, Brendan, if there's a hole in that, there does open this up a crack to the bit of there being some truth to this because of that, right? Am I putting any kind of causation here on this? Where it's like one does kind of lead into the other as far as, well, if you were doing this on this, then it is feasible. You got up at one point and you just panicked, but I don't think he's doing it on every play. Maybe it happened on like one play if it happened, and then it's being overblown and talked about like it happened on all these plays. I still, though, if I was a betting man and somebody said you have to bet whether or not this is the truth or not, I'd be like, no, I don't think he's getting to that.
Yeah, I think what happened is that it happened once, and then someone in the locker room who doesn't like him decided to run with that and say, "Oh, it's happening all the time."
Yeah.
But if something like that happened, wouldn't it just happen once, and then his teammates would look at him and be like, "What the hell are you talking about? Don't do that," and then it would be done.
It would, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing, Brandon. It's just watching the Wilson story unfold. You just sit there and you go, I can't believe what I'm watching. Because it's this story, right? This is like any quarterback having this kind of story would be insane on itself, that they're calling plays from another team. You'd be like, oh. But in this year, it's just like, oh, file that with all the rest. Or, Brendan, file it with the running back in the locker room playing his baby's daddy.
Future,
His mother,
future.
Future is playing Future music in the locker. You're hearing, and again, it's probably not the truth, but these stories keep coming, and it's like one after another where you're like, no way that he did that. And I don't think, again, Melvin Gordon probably did, but the fact that you keep hearing these things, they're so specific and so just one after another out there. High knees on a plane, and
that one's true.
bands.
We know that.
I know. That's why this stuff, he does all this other stuff that's around it that all makes it fit in. It gets hard to disseminate what isn't and isn't, really going on there. But yeah, this story has been like nothing else watching it unfold ever that I've ever seen in football before. I've never seen a player this quickly fall off at a quarterback position. Other positions, yeah, you'll see guys fall off year to year, sure. But a quarterback like this to fall as far as he's fallen, and I can't just blame it on Hackett, and I can't just blame it on a new team, and I can't just blame it on this. Like it's not just us saying this. There's players saying this across the league. He's not playing well, playing bad football, and this kind of drop off is insane. But I'm hopeful with you, Mumbles. I don't have any hate for Wilson. I want him to be bad this year, so the Broncos are bad, so we get a good pick. Next year, I hope him not the best, and I do hope he does correct these things, because if he does correct them, he will elongate his career. He will be able to play into the 40 years of age that he's talked about. But if he doesn't, he's going to last about another 2 years, and that's going to be about it. And it's really whether or not he picks that up or not at this point that's going to determine that.
I'm going to be honest. I don't think he figures it out. I don't.
I think he had to start to put this work in long ago, Brendan. It's one of those things of like, it's the grasshopper and the ant, right? The old story, like the ant, or, you know what I mean? Like, and like, it's like Geno Smith's been out there grabbing all these stone or all these nuts and squirrel and the ant, whatever it was. You got the one thing that just wants to chill all summer and doesn't want to stow anything away. And then the other creature's stowing it away. And then the other one gets cold and he's like, so it's too late now. It's like, it's winter. You're in your season of the winter of your career, Russell. It's the winds are blowing. It's cold. There's nothing to go pick food wise. You needed to do this younger when you're earlier on, and to try to fast forward it now, probably not reasonable to believe that you can just kind of jumpstart that from a kind of a 0 point as he's going to, I don't think it's complete 0 point, but I think he's going to be very, very far back, in that respect of things.
Right. Mumbles, thank you for the $2. Brandon eating his bitter chocolate pie.
I got in the fridge right now, man. I could show you right now. I got half that sucker to still go through tonight.
Yeah.
So you believe that.
I tried sweet potato pie for the first time ever this year, and it's identical to pumpkin pie. And I'm like, this is literally, how is this different from pumpkin pie?
Oh, I've done sweet potato, and I can't do sweet potato.
I thought it was fine, but I was like, did I get the wrong thing? Is this thing labeled sweet potato pie, but they put a pumpkin pie in there because it looks the same, it tastes the same, it has the same consistency? Like, what am I missing?
Maybe you got pumpkin, because whenever I've had sweet potato, it's definitely different than pumpkin, and the consistency and all that's got a different, like, it would be opposite ends of the scale,
Yeah, I don't know, very weird. But anyway, all right, so last thing we got to do today, we've talked about this Raiders matchup. I think we both know which way we're thinking about this game going in terms of the win and the loss column. But let's go ahead and throw a score up there. What do you got?
30-17.
I like
Seahawks.
I'm gonna say 27-10. Okay. 27-10. I think that Raiders offense, especially if Jacobs is not right, and if they don't have Miller, which I think they'll have Miller, but Jacobs either way, there's just not much they can do. I think it's going to be kind of like that Saints game for them. Not that bad, but it's going to be the same idea where there's just nothing for their offense to really do.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they're going to be able to just dink and dunk us to death. We've had a variety of teams that we've played this year that have taken that approach to going after our defense. And in years past, you may have been able to get that done. This year's a different story. And maybe it's born out of the 3-4 defense, or born out of Sean Desai, or born out of Clint Hurd, or just different personnel. But you're holding it down in that respective things. You're going to squeeze those routes on Carr. You can get pressure on the front four with this offensive line, regardless of whether Colton Miller plays or not. You spoke about Jacobs. That calf strain's not going to go away over 2 days. It's still going to be on there on his leg. He's not going to be able to run at full force. And when you have those calf strains, you aren't able, it's like a hamstring. You just can't open up all the way because it feels like the thing's going to catch and grab on you most of the time, if it's what he's kind of going through. So you've got the steady state. The 12th man is going to be off the hook off of a bye week, been back home now. So it's going to be loud as well. In addition to it, I think they're going to let Geno go out there and really cut this Raiders secondary up. A lot of holes there and easy completions for him to have. I would hope they don't lean into as much the Buck strategy this week, Brendan, of let's just try to run out the gate and establish that. Establish Geno. Establish the pass. The West Coast offense is what you're running. It establishes the pass first into the run. You can still end up running all that you want to run at the end, all the attempts you want to put into it. But that's really where I'd like to see them go at, especially, Brendan, we're seeing the 5-man fronts from this Oakland or Las Vegas team. That'd be a way to, I don't want to run in necessarily 5-man fronts with 8-man boxes. Let's let Geno cut it up. So I hope they go that route. I think the offense will put up plenty of points in this game. like you said, I don't think they're out. You said, I think as you said, their offense has nowhere to really go against our defense that I can see. Not
Right.
with what they're having to go. If this had Darren Waller and Renfro, I think that they could put some points up on us. They get up
Oh,
over
yeah.
20 points, but down those guys, I think that hinders them.
I agree. And that's all we got to talk about this week, guys. Thank you everybody for coming out. We got over 250 people in here right now.
Let's
I know
go.
you guys are just recovering from your holiday still, but thank you for spending your evening with us. We're gonna do this again on Tuesday after hopefully a big Seahawks win.
Oh yeah.
And
Believe
yeah, we're
that.
gonna keep this going until the season ends, basically. And I think that's about it. I'm actually about to hop on Twitch here. I'm going to start doing Endgame on God of War Ragnarok. So if anybody
Get
wants
it.
to come watch that, look at the link in my video in the stream description. Hop on over to Twitch, and I'll probably be starting that in like half an hour or so. So if anybody's interested in that, please do so. And Brandon, I want to thank you for coming out on this Friday evening. Hope to see you in the very near future.
Absolutely.
And we got to do it.
Got to
Coming
do it.
off the bye week, we probably haven't done it in a while. We're a little out of shape.
They've forgotten, Brendan.
Yeah, they have. They may have. So we're gonna do it. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.